In the shadow of war and silence, Gaza stands as a haunting reminder of what happens when politics eclipse humanity. A land boxed in by borders and battered by bombs, where over 2 million souls wake each day to the sound of drones, the smell of dust, and the ache of hunger. It's not just a humanitarian crisis, it's a moral test for the world. And while the Biden administration has taken visible, albeit imperfect, steps to respond, airdropping tons of food aid into the besieged territory, the contrast with. The Trump administration's approach is not just stark, it's staggering. Sources now confirm what many suspected during Trump's presidency. The idea of airdrops was never seriously entertained. Not because the need wasn't urgent, but because the optics didn't fit the narrative. Behind closed doors, officials dismissed the concept as impractical, symbolic, even theatrical. They argued that airdrops wouldn't solve the crisis, that aid needed to be strategic, targeted, diplomatic. But what diplomacy was offered? What strategy was deployed? None. The reality is, the Trump administration viewed Gaza through a lens of geopolitical calculation, not humanitarian urgency. Every move was weighed against alliances, media cycles, and domestic optics. And in that calculus, the suffering of Palestinians didn't register as a priority. It was acknowledged, yes, but only in passing, only when politically convenient. The idea of parachuting food into a war zone was seen as a distraction, a gesture that wouldn't yield returns. And so, while children starved and families fled rubble, the most powerful nation on earth chose silence, chose distance, chose not to act. Meanwhile, allies like Jordan, the UAE, and Britain were conducting their own airdrops, risking aircraft, navigating hostile skies, and doing what they could to deliver aid. Their efforts weren't perfect, but they were visible. They were real, and they sent a message that even in chaos, compassion matters. The U.S., under Trump, sent no such message. Humanitarian organizations pleaded for intervention, warning of famine, disease, and collapse. But the administration remained unmoved. Officials argued that aid would be better delivered through negotiations, through regional partners, through creative solutions. But no such solutions were ever implemented. No negotiations were launched. No partners were activated. The truth is, the Trump White House saw Gaza not as a humanitarian emergency, but as a political minefield. A place where any action could be misinterpreted, criticized, or weaponized. And so they chose inaction. They chose to wait, to watch, to let others take the risk. And in doing so, they made a statement not just about policy, but about values, about what kind of leadership they believed in, about what kind of legacy they were willing to leave behind now. As Biden's administration attempts to reverse course-dropping aid from the sky in a desperate bid to save lives, we're left asking deeper questions. What does it mean when a government has the power to help, but chooses not to? What does it say about leadership that calculates optics over urgency, politics over people? This isn't about partisan rivalry, it's about moral clarity. It's about the difference between leadership that responds to suffering and leadership that rationalizes it. The Trump administration's refusal to consider airdrops wasn't just a logistical decision, it was a philosophical one. A decision rooted in a worldview where aid must be strategic, suffering must be weighed, and compassion must be conditional. But for the people of Gaza, there was no strategy, no conditions, only need, only hunger. Only the fading hope that someone, somewhere might care enough to act. And while Biden's airdrops are far from perfect, often scattered, sometimes dangerous, they represent something Trump's team never offered, a visible, tangible attempt to help. A recognition that even symbolic gestures can matter when lives are on the line, that even imperfect aid is better than silence. Critics argue that airdrops are inefficient, that they don't reach everyone, that they can cause chaos on the ground, and they're right, but they also miss the point. Because in a place like Gaza, where hope is rationed and despair is abundant, even a parachute of rice can mean something. Can mean that the world hasn't forgotten, that someone is trying, that survival is still possible, and that matters. That resonates. that saves lives, and not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually. The legacy of any administration is measured, not just by its policies, but by its compassion, by its willingness to act when action is hard, by its courage to care when caring is costly. And in the case of Gaza, that legacy is still being written, one parachute at a time, one missed opportunity at a time, one life at a time. The Trump administration had the chance to lead not just militarily, not just diplomatically, but morally. And they chose not to. They chose calculation over compassion, optics over urgency. And history will remember that, just as it will remember the airdrops, the aid, the attempts, however flawed, to make a difference. Because in the end, leadership isn't about perfection. It's about presence, about showing up when it matters, about doing something, even when everything says you shouldn't. And that's what Gaza needed. That's what it still needs. Not just food, not just medicine, but recognition, dignity, humanity. And that's what the Trump administration failed to deliver.